Councilmember Helena.
Present.
Councilmember Hurd. Present. Councilmember Cormet.
Present.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Present remote.
Councilmember Thisted. Present. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 7 members present.
Thank you. The first order of business is a discussion with our accountants, Marquette and Weaver, and I'd like to ask them, invite them up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Ken Marchetti, and we've been involved with the incorporation of the town, I think, pretty much from the formal date of incorporation. And I know I had many conversations with Mayor Riley kind of leading up to that, you know, what we could do and how we could do it. And I said, well, the hardest part is finding people to help us do it. So I procrastinated a really long time, but ultimately we got it on board. And I brought Beth Johnston with me. She's in my office. Beth and I worked together for about 10 years, I'd say. I lose track of time, but quite a long time. And we do mostly governmental organizations, a few municipalities, but also a lot of metropolitan districts. But they follow the exact same accounting principles, reporting requirements, and so forth. And, you know, same state budgeting laws, sales tax laws. In fact, one of the things that our office has done on the Metro District side was we were very involved with initial passage of the sales tax statute for metropolitan districts, and then following that we incorporated implemented sales taxes in a number of metropolitan districts as well. And we work, our office is in Eagle County, but we also do quite a bit of work in Summit County. We work with their resorts and some of their ski area things. We work with a couple of metropolitan districts over here. Just wanted to, we were over meeting with John and talk about 2025 budgets and how we're going to work together to get those done. Excited to have John on board with the town and Maddie and overall, I was telling Mayor Riley, it's been, for us, I was envisioning nightmares of, you know, new setup and who did this budget, where did they get their numbers, because they don't make sense. But this is one of those unusual cases where the numbers have really tracked really closely overall, and so it's been pretty smooth implementation from us. But wanted to, since we'd be over here anyway, just have an opportunity to meet everyone.
We appreciate you coming, and it was good to meet you in person for a change.
I know, yeah, we get all of our video time with everybody, and I'm still a little bit old-fashioned, like to meet in person, so it's great to be here in person.
Do any council members have any questions? Great. Well, Ken and Beth, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Next on the agenda is Tony Bird, Summit School District Superintendent, and he's going to talk a little bit about what the bond issue that we're about to see on the ballot really is.
All right.
So we have the superintendent here and one of the members of the board, Ms. Webster.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here with you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the superintendent of the Summit School District, and that is my boss going around the table there. Lisa Webster, one of our board members, longtime community member, and practice expectations, so I'm just going to give you the fact, share some pros and cons, and then if you have questions, we can answer those questions, and Lisa will share a little bit about the financial piece.
By the traditional model that is
Which was created in the industrial era and is essentially covering content and taking
to some degree, some county, or definitely a big deal in Colorado, natural resources and outdoor leadership, the skilled trades, human services, and education. The big idea here is to give our students a chance to really get their hands on learning around these big areas, what we call pathways, and in partnership with the Summit County community, so our students can get internships and externships in these areas. And these pathways and this CT expansion tends to be very well supported in the county. And so it's an honor to share a little bit about them. In order to do that, if you go back to the front page, the bond will, if it were to pass, expand space for current technical education,
build an innovation center next to the high school, and take Snowy Peaks, which is our alternative high school, next to the middle school, and move that over next to the high school. And you can imagine
and we've had 10 years straight of graduation at 100%. The students at that school have told me directly they don't have great access to career technical education as much as they love their school. This is a chance to do that in a way that would give them some rich hands-on learning. That's the idea behind the school. Plus, beyond that, their space is not great, to be honest. We would then, at the school, expand space there. And so, quick question for y'all. How many of you in here are familiar with the tiny house that our students built last year? Awesome example, right? So that is it, within the skilled trades partnership with Pearson Construction. They built a tiny house. You'll see right in front of school. It's beautiful, and they're already framing up the second tiny house. And that's given them a chance to get their hands on the learning and apply mathematics and critical thinking skills. Unfortunately, they did most of that in winter outside, right? So to give you a really specific example, this bond would help provide shelters for that kind of work, space for that kind of work. How many of you are familiar with the ski and bike tech program, guys? Okay, great. If you go in there, if you've seen it, we're doing that work, building snowboards, but in a really small space. This would expand that space and connect it so our students would then learn more about business, marketing, and entrepreneurship as well. One thing to build skis, another thing to learn how to do business, for example. So that's one big idea. A second is really housing. And so this bond takes a hard look at how we're going to support our staff. And I will give you a few data points. We have 600 staff, 285 teachers. I'm starting my third year. We have hired 123 of those 285 since I arrived. That kind of churn, as people know who run businesses and organizations, is very difficult to continue to support to get great learning over time. No superintendent would ever tell you,
No picture where Mike is using the computer mic right now.
But we are. So Eagle County, Warrenport, Aspen, Telluride, Steamboat, Steamboat to some degree, but certainly the rest of those are very involved in the housing for staff. So we have high turnover, and the single most important variable in student performance is an ongoing teaching staff that has lots of skills. The housing we're looking at and would build is actually for all staff, so it's important to know that too. 38% of our support staff is bus drivers, service, etc. Our applicant is part. So we will be taking 10 acres that we own in Silverthorne and building 60 rental units in Silverthorne, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, set up at different rates depending on your salary in order to make it much more affordable for staff to live. We're also in public conversations and share our board with Breckenridge around a potential partnership. That probably wouldn't land until later November, December, maybe even January, to work with our land and their support to build housing that could be for sale. School districts can't own it. Our housing survey says we need 170 to 180 units over these 5 years. So that's the second big rock. Another rock here is really critical maintenance, HVAC, safety and security systems, all of that. That's part of this bond as well. And then lastly, and then I'll turn to Lisa, which will be questions, is really, it's rebuilding Breckenridge Elementary. This has been a conversation in this county, I think, for a long time, before I got here. And we took lots of looks at what to do. So Breckenridge, there's a mention XCI that Colorado puts out, Facility Conditions Index, and Breckenridge is in the red, and meaning not good, leaving us with 3 choices. One choice would be merge it with.
You can check it again.
Make it a
I just unplugged everything and plugged it back
that would
in.
cost us $20 to $25 million. Create some traffic problems in Breckenridge. 2 would be to remodel it, which would cost us probably around $20 million when we looked at that. And 3 is to build a new Breckenridge. And so as we looked at that super closely, the board made a decision that I agree with. I proposed it, that we build a new Breckenridge Elementary. And so we will continue to look at other schools as we move down the road. And we will build that Breckenridge if the bond passes in the spirit of career and technical education at the elementary level as well. So those are the big ideas, and I know you have a lot on the agenda tonight. You'll see on this piece of paper, and I'll ask Lisa to come up and talk a little bit about the fiscal accountability piece. You'll see on this paper each of our schools, what would happen with the result of this bond, and on the back, a number of data points connected to the district. I want to close my part by just saying, I believe incredibly strongly that we have to change the paradigm of public education. And if we don't, the students of some school districts will miss out on something that's happening in St. Rain, Little Woodson, happening in the city, and Mango, and having Hooter, and having in districts around the state and the country. And they're telling me, students tell me routinely, they want more choice, they want more voice, they want more. And in a county like this, where there's so much connection amongst union members and businesses, the opportunity we have to be collectively working toward workforce development for this county is pretty powerful. And so we look forward to it. And thank you for those few minutes. And Lisa, if you don't mind talking a little bit about high school.
Thank you, Tony. So, in terms of fiscal responsibility, we're able to now that 100 districts there are in Colorado, and really across the Colorado Charter School Institute. We are one of 2 districts that have a AAA bond rating. That bond rating has been in place since I joined the board in 2015 and was in place from what I understand prior to that, which allows us to have the best interest rates for our bonds possible, which helps with taxpayer. I will also say we do monitor how interest rates. So once we had issued, we had a bond that's coming off this year. We basically refinanced it in 2021, which saved taxpayers $600,000. So we are always looking at how we can leverage and stretch funding as best we can to better support our students, whether that be with actual construction of the building or with those items that go inside the building. So I just wanted to point out those 2 things, and then wanted to give some time for some questions. So, okay. Okay.
Let's see, I forgot to share these, so definitely questions for either of us. One, the tax cost is if you own $1 million home, it's $13 a month or $150 a year for the bond. You can just scale that up and down for property owners. And then lastly, it's really important that I share on the back side of this page are arguments for and against the bond. You can certainly have longer lists here of for and a longer list against, but I'll share just a couple in the spirit of what you're expected to do and what I think is fair, which is, so an argument for is clearly that we would be providing future career preparation for students in more exceptional spaces. Secondly, it'll give us the chance to provide housing to really support staff and stay for the long haul. And then thirdly, it gives us a chance to rebuild buildings or fix or rebuild Breckenridge. The biggest arguments against we hear is concern about tax. I think it's important to know that the recent property tax increase, people, I think, some people that we received all that money to school district. In fact, we did not. We're happy to talk about that a little bit more. Lisa provided some context. And then also some will argue that we should focus more on teachers and students in classrooms instead of buildings and into curriculum and classroom materials and support for teachers. So that's a fair argument. And then Breckenridge is the smallest student population. Actually, that's not true anymore. It's actually gone up this year. But as printing of this, that was the case. And some people should not get into school as a result. Okay, questions?
Before you go to questions, I just want to point out one other fact. You mentioned the areas where you were partnering with towns. Before Keystone was formed, the area where West Hills is today, Keystone, that was designated for the Summit School District for a school. And Summit School District gave up that property. West Hills to be constructed. Just a little backward. So, any questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Permet.
Thank you for that presentation. And this is very interesting information sheet. Kind of talks about what you might spend money on, but not how much where. But I do wonder, and I appreciate the need for affordable housing. I do call the question if the biggest determinant in our student success is teacher turnover, and your solution is to build 1 and 2 and some 3-bedroom apartments, I question whether that's actually going to solve your problem, because every teacher that I've known at your schools who said, I'm leaving, it's been because they're not making enough money, or they want to start a family, and they're not looking to start a family in a 1 or 2-bedroom apartment. So, they start by moving to the county and then they move somewhere else. So what I see is all this money for some rental apartments and all this money for technology and updating spaces, I think it said, and innovation spaces, money for Breckenridge Elementary School. where's the money for the teachers if you actually want to do retention?
Yeah, great points all the way around. Thank you. Happy to take that on. A couple things that's important for you to know is bonds can't go for teachers' salary. That's important to know. Secondly, we will continue our there. I think it's important for you to know that the Summer School District is the highest paying rural school district in the state of Colorado. And we all believe we need to pay our staff more. Our belief is we need to do both and. We need to pay well and we need to provide housing. And the affordability gap today is significant. And I have, we can send any information you all want, but it's essentially you'd have to make more money than I do to buy a very basic house in some county. The other thing I would share, real quick. I can send you anything you want. This is meant to be a 2-pager that simplifies so you can see the big ideas. We have broken down to the dollar spreadsheets that are plenty detailed on how money we spend.
And the breakout for where the money's going to is on the right column. At the end of each description.
I appreciate your answers, and I look forward to that more detailed breakdown. The follow-up question I have is, you're talking about big ideas, and you have some great big ideas. And I see that you're looking at occupational training and personal development for the alternate education facilities for folks who are making it in the traditional school pathways. And I fully believe that people should be helped across the spectrum for those who can't make it, to those who want to go one direction with their education and another. You want to maximize each student's possible success, right? So my question is, and it might be that it's not a big enough idea to remain the flyer, what money would be going to students who are gifted students coming from our community?
Yeah, to the gifted students.
Are there any programs that would be supported or infrastructure that would be supported for them?
Yeah, of course. First thing I think it's important for you all to know, many of our gifted students go through the IB program, not all of them, and that to earn the IB diploma. Nothing changes on the IB diploma front. You could add it as a pathway if you want. That doesn't change. We continue to do that. I would also just offer to you that I visited, I'll give you one example. The EPIC campus, I'll give you two, in the St. Vrain Innovation Center, Littleton and St. Vrain. In those spaces, you found in pathways similar to these, very gifted students working with their hands on things like advanced manufacturing and engineering in a way that you can't do, to be blunt, in a very traditional space. So I think that our gifted students, all of us, frankly, will benefit from that. And then just give a sliver of the image of that. And St. Vrain in the Renovation Center, which I encourage you to look at, I know we're not St. Vrain, we're smaller. You'll see they have an aerospace pathway. They actually have a piece of a plane in there that the students are studying and using. They fly drones out the back of their school. They're thinking critically about how that works. While we don't have an aerospace pathway, we have spaces like advanced manufacturing and engineering that are going to bring in external experts to support us in hands-on learning that apply to all kids. So I think it's a great question, but I think a lot of this really will help.
I can add, as a parent of, again, I get this child who is now in college and really successful, who went through the Summit School District program. IB has about a 75% overlap in terms of the touching skills with GT. I will also add that every GT kid is different, right? So we need these pathways to serve all our GT kids in different ways. I'll just leave that at that.
Great answer.
Are there any questions? Councilmember Davis.
Really more of a comment, just a little background. I'm a professional educator, high school, primarily with principal certification. Not from this day, but I had the opportunity to tour the trades program in this. And with my educator's hat on, I was very with the program, and I could see the need for more space there. As a result, I just this week made a donation to the program. Congratulations, the school. The other thing I want to mention is programs that you all are offering are programs and preparation for people we need to hire all over this county. So, I felt that was obviously thoughtfully done. Congratulations, the school is beautiful.
Just on still. So I just want to, well, first of all, obviously I want to thank you for that and for the donations for, that means a lot. I do quickly want to note and questions. Oakley Van Moss, who teaches in that program, help help the students build the tiny house. It's bilingual. FYI, just for fun at the moment, he was just recognized by a state and national organization today, and the school received, as a result of his work doing that. I was at the celebration today, $50,000 to support career and technical education, which is really cool. And the Summit Foundation is obviously supporting in a large way. So thank you.
Councilmember Kirk.
I know you're Don, I appreciate that. But I wonder if you could, since you're here in Keystone, address the state of the schools that our kids go to.
So, for example, Summit Cove, and yeah, so I would just say Summit Cove is, sorry, okay, thank you for following me. Every school in this bond will have some improvements. I think we're looking at Summit Cove, for example, a playground and building maintenance inside. That school itself is one of our newer schools. I'm sure Lisa could add to that. So there's not a ton of change at Summit Cove. There's some. As that school continues to age, we will continue to upkeep the school as well. And so, we're fortunate that Summit Cove, and Summit Cove is in a very different place than Breckenridge. So,
No, I mean, I think you covered it well, Tony. It's a much newer school than a school like Breckenridge. However, we are looking at all our schools towards the future because every school will have its turn where it's going to need, it will age to a point where it's going to need some substantial maintenance or rebuild.
and just really show you this, and anyone who wants more detail, I can send no problem. These are docs on the page. But you can see that Summit Cove is going to receive some safety and security upgrades. It'll receive critical maintenance upgrades, HVAC, some roofing, probably not much, some paving, some tech upgrades, resurfaced spaces. So, yes.
Hi, thank you for coming. I just want to go on the record as saying I've had 3 kids go through Summit School District. 1 is graduated, but I still currently have 2, 1 in the high school, 1 in Summit Cove. I'm wondering if you could specifically address whether or not there are testing disparities between the elementary schools, and what those are. And you alluded to the size difference between the Breckenridge schools and let's say Summit Cove and Dillon Valley. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that. And also when you say Summit Cove is newer, would you put in context what that means in terms of when it was built and possibly updated last?
Sure. Okay, multi-pronged. I think your first question, if I missed something, let me know, is testing results and disparities. So maybe as a little context for everyone, Colorado has a state performance framework. It focuses very much on reading, writing, and math. We're all very, very important. And then we look at our results compared to the state and then compare to districts that are most comparable. The most comparable district for us is Eagle County, or Eagle School District. Down the road, in some degree, we're ranked fourth based on demographics. And so we look at those comparisons. Some of our 9 schools, 8 are essentially what's called in the green. And as a district, let me come back to that. Summit Cove took a dip the year before Julie Johnson became the principal. And so it actually dipped out of the green, short version, sort of into the yellow, needs more improvement. And so this year, fortunately, Summit Cove went back up. So that's very good to see. We continue, each of our schools has a different student body, and as a result, you have different results in those cases. So I give you another example, and we can talk about this for hours, which you don't have. Silverthorne was what's called Priority Improvement School a few years ago, has now moved all the way up into the green, which is very exciting to see. Dillon Valley was about the same this year as last year. And you want me to keep going through the schools, I can do that. I'm happy to.
More than stats in each school, I'm wondering how you can compare. I'm trying to reconcile the funding that was going for Breckenridge schools for facility improvements versus how we identify the needs academically, which is my priority as a parent.
Yeah.
Is improvement in scores and results versus building a shiny building.
Sure. I mean, first of all, the building doesn't, right? So we'll be clear, a building doesn't teach. And so what a building does do, and new designs of a building, there's plenty of research behind that. So when we walk into light spaces, open air, there's a definite connection to feeling good about being there and being excited about being in school. And there's a whole body of research around that. We will continue to focus very much on academics and academic rigor. We actually made some changes structurally after my first year, brought in some fantastic people that have mapped out very clear, and Lisa knows this as a board member because I'm accountable to the board, what's called, maybe this is language that you all know, standards-based instruction, ensuring that every single classroom is teaching to the standards that are applied from the state of Colorado. And then we're working on what's called academic rigor. Short version is making sure students have very challenging tasks. And just to give you a quick example of what we're up to, which honestly I don't think has ever been done in the Summit School District, is last year alone we did 400 classroom walkthroughs, looking at the teaching practices and mapping back to what the teaching should look like, and then working on changing those practices. This year, we're deepening that standards-based instruction and what's called success criteria, so that students then know how they're successful against those standards. And I think what we're up to is really fantastic work. It'll continue bond or no bond, right? So you have to have that kind of learning in classrooms. What the bond does is shift the paradigm, particularly at the high school. Now, as much as I would love every high school student to care about those tests, they don't. That's the bottom line. They care about credits, generally speaking. And I have 2 daughters in college. I've been through this. They care typically about having voice and choice in credits and thinking about their life after college and being excited about their learning. We'll continue to have those tests for them. What we need to have is a very engaging environment for them. I'll close by saying, as the example, I walked around, and if this doesn't answer your question, let me know. As we walked around and spoke to students at Littleton, just one example, and talked to their principal, they have 0 discipline issues, literally, in their CTE school, 0. And I actually asked the students, I wasn't sure if I should leave the principal, 0. And they have 0 attendance issues, and they have a waiting list to get into the school. And this is in the CTE space. I just don't believe, the students tell me all the time, look what happens in Oakley's class, they line up to go. They're buying into getting their hands on the learning, and that will change their engagement. Lisa, do you want to add?
Any other comments, questions? Council member Hagenau.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today and sharing some insight into the Proposition 4A. It seems like there's an all or nothing approach to this. So is there any plans, if the proposition does not get passed, to address the critical path, less polarizing items that might be included in the measure?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so first of all, just to share a little bit on the polarization, We surveyed the county and our poll came back very, very supportive of housing, 70%, 80% plus. So our indication was work on housing. And there may be different opinions out there at the moment, but that was the case. When we polled on Breckenridge, the poll was almost the same, surprisingly, inside Breckenridge as outside Breckenridge. And that the 60+% wanted either it to be repaired or replaced, and only 16% wanted to be combined with Upper Blue. So we did some more community digging on that front. And so it is a lot in bond at once, no doubt. It's important to share with folks, if you didn't know, the district hasn't run a bond since 2016. Typically, districts run bonds roughly every 4 years. So it's been 8 years. And some of that's because of the, I believe, although I wasn't here for this, superintendent turnover, COVID, trying to keep things moving, a lot of stress in the communities around the state. So, and construction costs have gone off the charts, as you know. So it's a little bigger than typically. But of course, if it doesn't pass, we'll regroup and work with the board and figure out how to move forward in different ways down the road. And that's what we'll have to do. We have plenty of thoughts on it, but sure. You want to add things?
Councilmember Kerr?
Thanks for covering all this material. So we've all watched the Denver school population freeze and shift. So I wonder, to put all this into context, what are the the school age population projections that you're looking at?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Some of the larger districts in the state not only have been shrinking, they've closed their schools, Denver, Jetco, et cetera, predicted to be flat, slightly declining. If so, slightly is in 40 or 50 students over the next 10 years. And so we're pretty much will most likely be flat. And demographers can argue over that. Some people don't believe that demographic study, but the board did run that study on them. Yeah. So we don't believe there's high risk we're looking at.
Tony, we'd like to thank you for coming today and taking our questions, some of them very pointed questions.
Sure.
So again, thank you very much for being here and getting us a little bit more up to speed on what's going on with the bond issue and what's happening within the school district. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all. Good luck. We appreciate it in Newtown. Take care.
Next item on the agenda is the discussion of Summit County child care tuition assistance. I think we were going to have a guest for that.
No, it's going to be me.
All right. Go ahead.
So I brought this up before and council asked for more information on how the Summit County Strong Futures and First Steps programs work. So in 2018, the voters of Summit County passed a tax issue to fund pre-K education. That tax pays for four-year-old and 5-year-olds who aren't in school yet, pays for a pre-K education. After they were in for a few years, the communities in Summit County kept hearing there was a serious child care problem. Child care for someone 3 and under cost on average $90 a day. So we're talking $2,000 and $24,000 a year for working parents, which was just really an untenable number for what many of the workers in Summit County. So in 2023, the county and the towns of Blue River, Breckenridge, Frisco, Dillon, and Silverthorne passed an IGA to fund, help offset the cost of child care tuition for children 3 and under. Their over 700 kids, approaching 800 kids in some county right now, 3 and under, who are in some sort of daycare program. And there is a place that really needs to be cleaned up, but there are probably several hundred more kids who aren't in daycare but are hoping to get in childcare. The IGA that the communities came up with committed the towns to contribute to help offset the cost of childcare, up to $1,400 a child in some cases, on a sliding scale based on your gross income, and then it had some exclusionary issues. The parent had to work 30+ hours a week in some county. If there were only one parent working at different scale, if you had assets above 225,000 outside of your primary residence and retirement savings, you were ineligible for the program. They apportioned the contributions to the towns based upon the percentile of the students in the program who lived within each town's boundaries in the county. And I believe Keystone was 3.7% of the total students in daycare 3 and under. So that would, the latest ask, the budget ask for 2025 is approximately $2 million for the First Steps program. There are 2 programs, pre-K, which towns have nothing to do with, that's funded entirely through tax. And then the First Steps, which are funded through donations from the town and county. The ask is $2 million for 2025. The board, which is composed of the town managers and the county manager, has asked the county to divert $1 million from the First Steps program to the from the pre-K program to the Steps program, bringing the cost approximately $1,000. So the ask from Summit County or from Keystone is, depending on whether the county makes that commitment, will be between $40,000 and $70,000 to offset the tuition for the students. The tuition assistance is paid directly to the daycare provider, but the applications have to come from the parents themselves, along with significant pay stubs, tax receipts, itemized list of assets. And it's been a really successful program. Like I said, we're helping approximately 700 families work rather than having to stay home and take care of the kids or move somewhere else because they just can't make it up there. And I guess, are there, what questions would you like me to answer?
Any questions? Councilmember Hagenau.
Thanks for the background, that was really valuable. Great conversation about how to address the problem of the cost. Have there been any conversations from the county or state level that you know about to address the root cause of unviewing? Is this rapid increase in actual cost from the providers?
There's providers actually don't get paid very much. Even at those high levels, it's state regulations on how many children, especially as you get younger like that, you need an instructor for, depending on the age group. I think the youngest is 1 instructor for every 6 infants, I believe. So that just
3. It's 1 to 3.
It's expensive just to staff these places. So.
Other questions? Councilmember Davis.
Just to clarify, that is $1,400 a month.
Correct.
Okay, yes, and so
the parents do pay part of that then.
Yes, they do, and that's pretty much the highest level.
Right.
Of subsidy.
And just to follow up, do we have that money in the budget?
Yes.
Can we afford
It's kind of nice just to have 3.7% of the kids, that were responsible for it.
I think the affordability question will really be addressed during the budget process. Wasn't the intent of this more of an update and more background information?
Well, and if the council's okay, we should move forward with starting off the IGA. But we do have, we can afford this.
Councilor listed.
I'm glad to know we can afford this, prior to our budget meeting, because that was my question as well. I wanted to make a comment. I think that it really distinguishes us, as a community, committed to support.
Even when the county will make the decision about it, we've got something to have some program.
We're expecting.
We do address that.
The problem is we're going through the budget, we're going through the budget process. Yeah.
Right, but I think decisions are, so very honestly, I really appreciate this background. When the voters were asked to approve this, first, the pre-K program, why did it start at 3? When everyone understands that the cost and the demand for the younger ones, so much more.
I speculate that it was an educational thing as opposed to a child issue.
School readiness.
Getting people prepared to start school. That's pure speculation.
I guess then, that I think what you're looking for then is a thumbs up on bringing an IGA to a future council session, for joining the Summit County IGA program, the IGA, joining the IGA for tuition system. So, go ahead.
So, what's the backup plan if the county does transfer the $1 million?
That's the 70,000 homestead fund.
We actually committed to either option at this point, or could we say, no, we can't afford 70, we can only afford.
Even if we sign the IGA, we're never committed if we don't budget.
Councilmember Kerr.
I think that's an important consideration because even though the pre-K programs is voted approved and budgeted, this is essentially a charitable operation on behalf of the municipality. But that's a good one. But we are in a study position, so should we have a handle on maybe we'll get that when we discuss the budget, how much we can afford. Do you want to discuss the nicotine tax with respect to this?
It just, many of the other communities have been able to use their nicotine tax dollars and the excess of tax dollars above what's paid for programs, to help fund this program. It's still technically all coming from their general funds in a way, but the tax dollars are specified towards certain things that can be used, and the other communities have found a way to justify this with language. So we will have excess money from the nicotine tax over and above what's funded, the nicotine programs that are funded. So it will help us some of this cost.
Will that be clear? Look at the budget.
Hopefully.
So, thank you.
I'll be that honest, it's not clear in the draft budget that was given to you right now, that's how much the final dollars. Policy.
Any other questions? Then, can I get a, thumbs up, since the IGA does not commit the town to actually contribute dollars? That decision we make in a normal budget process. Can I get a thumbs up to allow the staff to come back to the council with the childcare IGA? Good. So directed.
What did you do, Dan?
Oh, Dan? Got it. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is discussion of the county building department IGA. I'll go ahead, let's go ahead with that one. So with that being said, Jimmer, you've written a memo with regards to this issue. Basically, we've been working cooperatively with the county's building department for the last 7 months via an IGA, and then actually there was an IGA before that. That IGA comes up at the first of the year. Basically, I initially had some concerns with regards to how it was all going to work and coordination. We did look previously at some other options, but quite frankly, I'm very pleased with the transition so far. So my recommendation is to stick with the county building department. You have another IGA attached for your reference. I would recommend continuing on to the next year to reevaluate and fine tune with the county and explore other options once we have a little bit more data with regards to how the process is working. Quite frankly, you're not going to make everyone happy, but in all honesty, the transitions work quite well, in my opinion. So with that being said, if you have any questions, please ask. Any questions? Councilmember Houston.
Did I read correctly that Keystone isn't currently in section? That's absolutely fine. I don't.
That is correct. The county is doing the building inspections.
Under IGA agreement with the town.
Okay.
So they're doing the function for the town.
That is correct.
My other question is, what task can Keystone realistically assume currently two staff members? Is that something we're looking to do for those tasks in-house after the next year, or contract with an outside?
So, excellent question. 2 members that you have on staff are not really qualified for building inspection and building permit review. That's not what we do. We do the planning side of applications that usually run either concurrently or prior to a building permit being issued. So the other alternative would be retaining a third-party consultant that specializes in building permit review and inspections.
Any other comments?
Council member,
Question.
Yeah.
If you can hear me, a couple quick questions. The 10%, is that reasonable for the efforts that you're going to have to do? And what are those efforts? And then the other question I had is 10% of what? What is the total in real numbers that you anticipate for this service on an annual basis?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's one of the reasons I'm suggesting that we keep it status quo so we get more information. There are a lot of irregularities in the community, and you really need a full year to fully evaluate it. As far as the 10%, I believe it is relatively fair with regards to what the town staff is doing with regards to the building permit process.
So
Yeah, man.
If I may, we anticipate that the total permitting cost for buildings are around $400,000. So the town will get $40,000, the county will get 360,000 of that. They collect and remit the 10% to us, and that's annually. When a building has a permit, the county's involved from first step. They have to actually go over it, look through it with an engineer, building official's eyes, make sure it meets all of the building codes and such. And then throughout the building process, they have to go out and do the various building inspections, to make sure it's being built according to the building codes and the approved plans.
Any other questions? With no questions, again, I think you're looking for guidance of whether or not to proceed to develop or proceed in the IGA direction for next year.
That is correct.
Can I have a show of thumbs of who would like to have the town proceed with that IGA? That's unanimous. I think you have your direction. Thank you very much. Next item is discussion of unscheduled absences, and I recognize Councilmember Fisker.
I'd like to make a motion to request, public participation and comment in this topic. I think, we're here as town council members elected by the public, and if we have interested public attendance and engagement, I think we should give them the respect to be able to comment, since both of the work that we do seems to happen in work sessions, and town council meetings seem to result in more of a gavel drop. So I would request allowing comment, since the precedent was made in the last town council meeting or work session, to allow the public.
The president, there was no president. That was a council meeting where we allowed that.
Okay, the lines were blurred between the work session and the council meeting. When it was my understanding that the council work session included the interview
No,
of the.
we did not work session last meeting.
Again, on the record is saying a lot of the work that we do as town council members and the decisions and the consideration that we have is done during work sessions. I think if we have public interest, they should be allowed to comment.
Thoughts of council members? Do we have any comments? Councilmember Burnett?
I agree with the confusion, but very clearly we didn't have a work session. However, this topic definitely belonged in a work session rather than in the last meeting. And just a general comment, I find it remarkable the amount of time, effort, and emotion that we put into this discussion, which is quite frankly a solution for a problem that does not exist, out of fear that it may one day exist.
Any other comments? Councilmember Thurr.
So I appreciate community participation. That's why we have coffee with council members, so that we understand. That's why we have a comment period, some comment period built into every council meeting. That is a tried true over decades approach to do that, so that we can have discussions amongst ourselves. I hate to not include the interest of our community members tonight. The precedents are tricky. It might make it difficult in the future when we don't know. And I know that's what we're trying to do, is anticipate future concerns, issues, problems. And maybe we stick to what we know does work.
Other comments? Councilmember Fisker.
I would ask our town manager how other communities that you've worked in operate, and whether or not they have allowed comment during work session.
Well, it very much depends. This is kind of unique to any communities I've worked in before. The way you as a council operate. um, workshops in other communities where I've worked have tended to just be kind of informational sessions. You know, they make the sausage in meetings. I much prefer the way this is operated here. I think you as a council made a wise decision in making the sausage during the workshops, getting it through the meetings, but it all depends on the issue we discuss too. How much public was ever invited. So I really don't think it would make sense.
Any other comments? Councilmember Permit?
I'm not opposed to public input. I do think that we need to selectively do it and not establish a permanent precedent. And with respect to this specific conversation, well, again, I'm not going to oppose it. I do think that this conversation is far too immature and undeveloped as far as us being on the same page. This could go so many different directions. It's kind of hard to seek public input at this point.
Any other comments? Councilmember Hagan.
I also agree with the notion of public input. I'm just concerned that the line would get blurred between, a council meeting where public input is expected and allowed in a work session where the meat and potatoes and sausage can be made per se.
Any other comments? Councilmember Davis.
I've heard. I have an opinion on what I think our citizens want, but I wouldn't mind at some point, it doesn't have to be in a work session, hearing what the expectations are. Because they turn up. And if anyone in the room wants to email me and let me know their thoughts, that's fine too, if we don't have comments.
Councilmember Thirsty.
Again, if in fact we are making the sausage in the work sessions versus in town council meetings for, I think it's really unfortunate that the council is not taking into account input that would inform making the sausage during work sessions.
Councilmember Permit.
I think that's one way to look at it. I think a better way to look at that is, in no way is public. Like I said, I'm not going to oppose public comment here, but that's not what's required to get public input for this. People can write letters, people can comment at the meeting following work sessions, and people have. And if the expectation is that all work sessions we're making sausage, so we're going to have public input at every work session, I'm just going to point out, we run from 4 right up to 7. We're spending 3 hours and not getting through our agenda. We've spent way too much time talking about this particular topic, and I'll make a motion to limit the discussion today. I don't know if that'll get supported, but we are going to look at some efficiencies, but in no way is that cutting off public input. Anyone is absolutely able to still comment at the start of the meeting that immediately follows, to send in mail, and again, we want to allow a one-off comment period here. Again, I'm not going to put that, but I am nervous about having forever open discussions about ideas that we can bounce around, because we'll never get through with anything.
All right, any other comments? Yeah. My thoughts on it, and I'm torn. I think public comment and public input is extremely important. We'll have a public comment period at 7 o'clock that anyone can talk on any topic. What we're dealing with today is something that's not made yet. We don't know where we're going to go and what it's going to be. And the only decision that would be potentially made would be some direction to council to draft bylaws, draft a change to a bylaw that we would consider at a future meeting. Today, we have an opportunity at 7 o'clock for public comment, or shortly thereafter at the council meeting. Whenever this would come up again, there would be further opportunity for comment. on it as well. So I'm concerned about the time we have. And the purpose of these sessions is to hash out issues for us and to bounce around ideas for us right now. So I am concerned about establishing a precedent that in future meetings that we may find ourselves spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes out of a scheduled 2-hour period, which often turns out to almost be a 3-hour period. Well, we're trying to even define the shape of the sausage that we're trying to make. So I have concerns in that area. With that, if there's no more comments, what I'd like to do is just do a thumbs up and thumbs down of whether or not we should allow public comment today on this, in the work session of this, on this topic. All in favor of public comment in the work session, please put a thumbs up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 4 to 3. Public comment is allowed. So with that, I will open a public comment period. Please line up. I would like you to state your name, where you live, and you have 3 minutes to provide a comment.
Point of order, question.
Well,
I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure when it's appropriate to comment, if it's a topic hasn't been discussed yet. Thank you. Sorry, if I may.
There is no decision made by this board, so your conversations will inform the board and say, oh, their discussion.
again, we have already opened the topic for discussion about getting back. So again, I'll open the period of public comment.
I have a point of order question. Is there the same limits on time?
I've already provided that information. 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I would like to ask that if you've already written an email, that you not repeat that.
You are free, anything you would like in the public comment period. You can't let it.
I think depend, I asked.
Please come to the podium, again, state your name. And the council will not be responding to your comment. We'll be listening to your comment.
I'm sorry, I just have a simple.
Please approach the podium when you would like to make a comment. Kathy?
My name is Kathy Orland, and I live in Loveland Pass Village for a lot of years. And the agenda package that was sent out by the town had proposed bylaws.
Those proposed bylaws have been removed from the latest package. They're no longer in the agenda package that's being considered. Those were inserted by mistake.
Okay. But so my main concern is about, and for Aaron, the charter actually had much discussion about attendance in the charter convention. And that discussion was going on for a couple of meetings at least. And so that is the basic, so that a deliberation and an agreement was to put it in the charter and not an organization. That's important because town council when as many times keeping it in an ordinance, letting it in an ordinance makes it much easier to amend, and if it's in the charter, you needed a vote of the residents. So it is in the charter, is part of the charter, and it was part of the charter was to have a goal of ensuring the integrity of the town council with the residents. I'd also like to point out the nonverbal aspect communication. For example, tonight, I can't see what was going on there, and I would never be able to see it at in my computer at home. But there's a lot of times where there's a lot of eyes rolling, gesticulation. So there's a lot of nonverbal communication that goes on before when nobody's saying it, but just putting a thumbs up or down. So what I think is that the charter, the town council needs to honor the charter. And there are a number of you that were on the charter commission, and some of you weren't. But that's a big distinction that was pointed out time after time by our attorney. So I would like to suggest that if there are going to be significant changes in the charter as to attendance, that needs to go to a vote of the people. So that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, my name, where you live? Mac Griffith at Gateway.
Great, thank you.
And my question was so simple-minded as to be ridiculous, which is, what's the argument about? I was hoping to turn to you because I'm sitting back there and I have been absent because of illness for quite some time. And so I'm trying to get back in the swing of things. And clearly, there's a lot of inside baseball going on, and I don't know what it is or what's happening. That's my question.
Well, thank you very much for your comment. Any other comments?
Steve Martin, reside at 242 Elk Crossing Lane, full-time resident, registered voter. Thank you for the courage of trying this tonight. I understand the pros and the cons, so thank you for this opportunity. I think you'll find that as we discussed and talked about, that the intent is for the town council to conduct in-person meetings. I think you'll find that the residents, the community, the registered voters are probably trying to hold you to a higher standard of the expectation is for an in-person meeting due to the advantages of being in person. While there is the definition of excused and unexcused absences, life happens. There's outside work commitments, there's outside life commitments, family commitments. So there are emergency situations where electronic participation is a valid option. I meant to start this by saying thank you for the many hours the town council serves in work sessions, town council meetings outside of here that they represent the town. As I say, we hold you to a high standard because you're our first town council. You have a tremendous job ahead of you. We have expectations for you to put us on the right path as the town moves forward. So hopefully, before anyone submitted their application to be on the town council, they kind of knew what some of the expectations were. This is not your full-time job. You may feel like a full-time job. You're not being compensated as a full-time job. So thank you. You do have a very aggressive meeting schedule of 2 meetings a month. So like I say, just to let you know that, we are behind you, but we do have high standards and high expectations for you to put us on the right path. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hillary Hoffman. I live at Mountain House at Key Condo, and I've been a resident here for about 8 years. I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else said, except first of all, thank you for everything that you all do. I know what a commitment it is to do this. I volunteer on a number of committees and my HOA, and it takes a great deal of time and effort for which we give out of our heart and out of our care for our town. I think really what Steve said and what Kathy said about holding everybody to a higher standard. I attended every one of the commission, the charter commission meetings, every single one in person. And I recall very vividly how much time was spent discussing this subject about in-person attendance, about the intent of what the town council was what the meetings were supposed to be. And we devoted a great deal of time, or you devoted a great deal of time on that discussion and what it would look like in the charter. And what I got out of that was that it was extremely important to be here and be present, and that if you didn't want to make that commitment, perhaps being on the town council wasn't the right thing for you. I know of people who truly did not apply to be or run for town council mainly because of that, because they didn't want to have to stick to an in-person schedule. The schedule is out there. Everybody knows the schedule. You know what day it is. If there's something that would affect a large group of you at the same time, like a holiday, I see where that would maybe necessitate changing the schedule. But as far as scheduling personal, unscheduled things like vacations and things, I think personally, you know what the schedule is and you should be able to schedule around it. And I personally would like to see my town council members in person at meetings. And I really think that was the flavor of what we wanted to do when you wrote the charter. And so I support what my other constituents agreed, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Patty Banks, 246 Razor Drive, permanent resident. I was speaking for my husband Tommy also, and I've been here for a long time. I agree with all the speakers ahead of me. I think I'm in-person attendance for these meetings for all those reasons. And I'm also concerned about what Kathy said about, I think I understand, between the charter rules and ordinance, and if we can change what was agreed on in the charter. I'm a little bit concerned with that. Thank you for all of our feedbacks.
Are there any other comments? Before we go into overall discussion, I want to clarify one thing, and maybe I'll ask the town attorney that. I believe that as I read the charter, the definition of excused and unexcused was left in the charter to the council for bylaws. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. The charter does not go into the definition of absences or excusing and unexcused absences.
And I think we all recognize these things. With that, I'll turn it over to the town manager to introduce the topic.
Okay, so this topic, and this is going to be about the last I have to say about it, it has to do with two different issues here, actually 3 different issues. The first is what is attendance and what attendance is required. And the charter specifically calls out that you are allowed 2 excused absences, or 2 unexcused absences, pardon me, 2 unexcused absences from meetings And that can be for anything. An unexcused absence is not necessarily a bad thing or a wrong thing. It's just an unexcused absence. It might be a vacation, it might be any number, it might be your best friend's birthday party. After 2 unexcused absences, the council member on the 3rd or thereafter is subject to sanctions by the council, and the sanctions are defined in the charter either. The second issue that the council is talking about is participation. Whether you're on an excused absence or an unexcused absence, to what degree are you allowed to participate remotely? We are budgeting for better remote equipment, by the way, in coming there. And the third issue is, should you be allowed to vote if you're participating remotely? These, the council is determined, or it's my understanding, are 3 separate and distinct issues that nonetheless have a nexus. But it's 3 distinct issues that the council is trying to determine how to move forward on. And I will pass it on to the mayor and our attorney.
Did anyone have any comments? There were 2, I didn't see hands raising quickly. So did you input? Councilmember District.
I want to acknowledge that this has to seem like a comedy of errors to people looking in on us squabbling over attendance. But I want to reinforce my position that this conversation is much more fundamental and crucial than it might appear. It does relate to the integrity of the charter and those upholding the charter, and the promise that we made to the community when you guys voted yes. If the group consensus is to change the integrity of the charter, I think we need to show respect for ourselves, our commitment to our oath, and the residents that we represent by allowing vote on a significant change to policy. I want to point out that we are only compelled to attend 2 meetings a month. The terms of the commitment were clear when we applied, and we are elected and paid to be here 2 nights a month. I feel a little bit gaslighted for this conversation. It was referenced that 4 of us did sit on the Charter Commission and helped write the charter. I did review my notes from the charter meetings that related to attendance. Those conversations occurred the first 3 weeks of May 2023. Originally, we stated in-person attendance, period. Then we added the revision of circumstances that may necessitate another form of meeting. But that conversation around that provision centered solely on broader unforeseeable events, COVID and natural disasters that prevent in-person attendance. My notes from the charter are very clear. Most towns don't have to worry about whether or not those running for elected offices are residents who live here full time. Keystone does. The in-person attendance provision was intended to raise that standard for elected officials beyond the pitiful voter registration requirements. There's a similar provision in the charter that's a requirement that a potential candidate has to prove that they physically resided in Keystone for over a year, not just own property or recently changed their voter registration. The charter requires in-person attendance for meetings. Today, the intent is being perverted for people's own needs and desires to be absent. It opens the door for further distortion of the charter down the road when people who weren't privy to the original intent are long gone. This is our Constitution. The attempt to circumvent in-person attendance is semantical tap dancing that undermines the credibility of our council and the charter's intentions. Vacations happen. Take your vacation. While someone is on vacation, I don't want to question whether someone is attending in the middle of the night with blurry eyes, has been or is drinking, is distracted by trying to catch a plane, or sitting on a dive boat or in a jeep deep in the jungle, whether they have read the packet and prepared to have or have access to the materials being discussed. For those listening, our packets can be hundreds of pages, and they often require additional research and consideration to be a meaningful participant, much less to cast an informed vote. Again, this is not a technology debate. Most would agree our current technology leaves something to be desired, And I agree that we need to improve technology to accommodate the community ability to attend remotely. Council members, if you want to attend while you're on vacation, fine. Call in like other members of the community and risk poor connection, inability to follow the meeting, and lack of accountability. You shouldn't be participating remotely, and you definitely shouldn't be given the privilege of voting on important matters. We're only required to attend 2 meetings a month. I am a reasonable person. There may be circumstances that necessitate another form of meeting. That may include illness or emergencies or other unanticipated, uncontrollable absences, but let's not undermine the entire policy and intent of the charter that voters approved. Let's be judicious and conservative and not self-serving. We have to preserve the meager safety net we have in place that was intended to ensure locals serve in elected positions.
I'd like to thank Valerie for that impassioned, prepared statement and everyone who participated on the Charter Committee. I attended some of those meetings myself, but I was not on the committee. I have to say, though, that the Charter Committee did great work and they wrote a charter. They wrote it, and the voters approved what was written. And we cannot then have people come and say, well, what we really meant to say was, we can't operate based on that. You wrote it with the idea that we would have to go off what's written. And nobody here has proposed changing the charter. And anyone who's suggesting that this group has proposed changing the charter is not doing anyone any favors by stoking those fears. That being said, there is no safety net. Or if there is, it's weak. Because I agree with Valerie that the great fear here is that someone would try and subvert the system, Trojan horse the system, not live here, register, run, get on, and then put the registration back or whatever, continue not to live here, and then try to be on the council while not really being a resident here. That's the worry. However, there's nothing that stops someone from living in Boulder from driving up here every Tuesday where there's a meeting. This continues to be an extensive debate about a problem that is not present, hasn't presented itself, could maybe someday, and yet the big worry that's being stoked here is still not going to provide the level of safety net that is truly desired. And you know, if that problem comes up, we're going to have to solve it a different way, most likely. So, with that in mind, I do want to remind folks that as we think about our bylaws, which the charter empowers us to write, that should be written with a modern, careful, and forward-thinking mindset that allows people to join and be on the council from all walks of life, whether it's those of us who live here and work multiple jobs, of which this is one of them, and those who are retired or don't have to work and can make this their primary outside of family life. So flexibility built into the bylaws is a good thing. That's what I have to say.
With that, Councilmember Davis.
I want us to remember that as Aaron's, I'm sorry, Councilmember Parnett said, what we are doing is looking at arranging the bylaws to work for not only this council, but councils in the future. Bylaws tell us how we want to do business, how we want to work. And they're not revised every time we turn around. So I think that's what we're talking about is the bylaws. And what they're also talking about some things that are clearly vague in the current bylaws and clearly vague and they are not addressed in the charter and probably inappropriate to address in the charter. I also want to, and I'm glad he's on virtually. I want to thank Dan, I'm sorry, Councilmember Sullivan for the time and effort he made. And speaking to, I believe, everyone on the council and looking for some alternatives. And I believe he started his email to us with, this isn't going to make everybody happy, but it is a middle of the road approach. And so, Dan, thank you for the many hours you spent doing.
In a moment, I'll recognize Councilmember Sullivan to talk a little bit about the proposal that he has in the package. As a preface to that, obviously I was on the Charter Commission, and I sat through those discussions and very in-depth and passionate discussions that we all had on that topic. The charter very clearly left it up to the council to come up with the definition of unexcused. And I still, as the town manager mentioned, I think there's three issues that we're addressing. The first is excused, unexcused. Once you resolve that issue, then you get into the second question of allowing someone to attend remotely. And largely what happens in that first discussion actually puts a cap on the amount of time someone can attend remotely. It's still a 10 because with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Sullivan to talk about a proposal, something concrete. At least we can sink our teeth in instead of dealing at the emotional level that we have been to take a look at this. Councilmember Sullivan.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Riley. Well, I think the irony of all ironies is I'm doing this remote now. So I think it's kind of a sad state. I will say that the technology, I agree with some of the comments made that needs to continuously improve. I mean, while I've been able to participate and I can hear most of everything, some of the external folks that joined, maybe they weren't hitting their mics, but it was a little difficult. So I can understand that technology. That said, I do think that what I've done over the last couple of weeks is I did speak with most of the council folks, and there we have some black and white issues. And so my hope was to come to something that was more that would work for the city, work for council, and work for future council. So along those lines, I one of the first things I did make the assumption in listening to our legal counsel is that if we do talk about additional days, we do talk about participation, we do talk about voting, we're not in violation of the charter. So these are bylaw issues. As I read it, I understand the comments earlier that maybe that wasn't the intent of everybody, but as I read the charter, and I was on the charter, I do believe that we're not in violation of the charter if we discuss these and they can go one way or the other. Within these comments, I put together I would say a proposal that allows up to 4 misses during a year for a council member. It encourages participation. It also encourages broad participation, including voting. And the way that that a couple council members described it to me is that we were voted in, and we are expected to participate as often as possible. And so that was the premise I went with. So the proposal, it talks to regularly scheduled and calendared town council meetings. It does expand a little bit on what is an excused absence, which is somebody being ill, family emergencies, or unanticipated or uncontrollable absences, and those would not count. So if you're sick, you're sick. We don't want you in the council meetings. Beyond that, we're saying all other absences cannot exceed 4. That includes 2 excused absences for any reason, as well as the 2 additional unexcused that we talk about in the charter. The proposal says we encourage participation virtually in all sessions, whether excused or not, except for quasi-judicial sessions, which really should not, we draw the line that virtual participation shouldn't be included in quasi-judicial sessions. But the executive sessions, where we all talk about things like negotiations of a contract or something, most people believe that that seems like a reasonable thing. So anyway, those are my comments.
Good. You've heard the proposal. What are your thoughts? Is there anyone other, Councilmember Hagan?
Thank you. And Dan, thanks again for taking a lot of time to compile this. Generally speaking, I agree with the notion that we should participate when appropriate to do so, regardless of why you're not at the meeting. But I do think that looking at those separately, right, what's an unexcused, what's an excused, and then the ability to participate is important, and not tying them together. But generally, I do agree with the notion of if we're able to, and nobody but yourself can really tell you if you're able to participate. So you can be on vacation, you can be out of town, but if you have the time and ability to review the packets, you know yourself if you've been able to be prepared for the meeting. So if you're able to participate, I don't think we should limit that as long as it's appropriate and professional. And I think that that's key, right? That Aaron, Councilmember Permont, for example, is not joining with the beach in the background, right? There's a professional background and there's a professional ability to join the meeting.
Let me try to focus this a little bit and focus back to the definition of scheduled and unscheduled, see if there's some agreement with not scheduled, excused, and unexcused. Is there some agreement with Council Member Sullivan's definition that if someone is sick, illness, family emergency, for those types of reasons, that would be considered an excused absence? Council Members, Parmet.
Just point 30, I don't believe that's what is proposed here. Those are considered unanticipated and uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, but so those are excused. What about work? Last.
Well, I'm only I asked the first question.
Yeah.
But I haven't got to work yet. I asked the first question on that. Now, would you like to add work into that subject?
Sure. I mean, we scheduled a 3 p.m. town council meeting 2 weeks ago. I believe work early. That's hard for I think that's just two of us who work full time. And there may be reasons that we need to schedule town council meetings earlier, but then it's not fair to then hold people who have their primary income tied to other sources. Say, well, gosh, that's not an excused absence. That's tough. And other things, there can be other work emergencies that come up as well. I mean, I imagine if there's a mass casualty incident and I needed to be at the hospital, you might not want to kick me off the council for doing that. Just.
But that's, again, I'm trying to find where there's consensus of for the basic reasons initially that Councilmember Sullivan discussed. Is there consensus of those things? Those should be excused. Yes?
Councilmember Bissett.
Yes.
I agree in general with Dan's proposition that illness and emergencies and perhaps some unanticipated and uncontrollable absences should be excused. But given how liberal the charter is being interpreted, I really feel like we need to be really clear about when unanticipated and uncontrollable absences include. And I hear what Councilmember Parment is saying about work, and I'm not opposed to those being included, but I'm very uncomfortable with leaving this so undefined that people can just interpret these for their own their own selfish needs and have it left to complete destruction. We need to really be clear about what the intent is and put it in writing of unanticipated and uncontrollable acts.
Councilmember Hagan.
Thank you. I do agree with, the comments that were just made, but I think on the flip side, we also need to be very tactical about defining what meetings we would require the attendance in. And I know that if you look at the letter of the law, right, you need 24-hour notice, please correct me if I'm wrong, for a meeting. And I would hate somebody like Councilmember Prema or myself, who does already have work scheduled, and then there's a meeting that's added that we would get penalized for that. So I think that on the flip side of being very specific with what's included for excused absence, we also need to be very specific what's a meeting that we would be expected to be in attendance with.
Councilmember Cormet.
Just two quick questions. One's a question of order for work sessions. I think we are required to be formal. I think we discussed in our first meeting that work sessions with these first names.
That's optional.
Okay. Second question is, what percentage of vote is necessary to change the bylaws? Is it simple majority or is it
Simple
super
majority.
Okay.
And again, in answering your question, Councilmember Hagenow, this talks about the regularly scheduled and calendared meetings. It does not talk about unscheduled meetings. I think that answers your question.
So to be very specific, that does not include the 24-hour notice meetings. All right, thank you.
Other comments, Councilmember Cormet?
Just pointing out that we had a scheduled meeting that did start at 3, and that wasn't 24 hours. So that if we're building this whole bylaws on the possibility that someone in the future might do something that this council doesn't think is good in this moment, we have to think that a future council could decide that future council meetings will be held from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Just saying.
Any other comments? Councilmember Davis.
I don't think bylaws are that specific when it comes to the time and date of the council meetings. I think what we're talking is attendance at the scheduled council meeting.
I'm trying to see where the council is, and again, I'm focusing solely on the statement in here of illnesses, family emergencies, or unanticipated, uncontrollable absences are excused. I'd like to also point out that the first level of review of that is the chair, presiding officer, and any council member can challenge that decision and bring it before the council for discussion if they agree with that decision. I recognize we're not going to have unanimity on this subject. On the issue of illness, how many of you could support the illnesses as defined in the paper that was in your package? Did I get a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Can you clarify, are you asking about that entire second bullet point?
And the second bullet point.
I think you should stick. I think you just asked about change.
Well, no, I want to find out if we have unanimity on the basic portion. And then let's talk about whether we would agree to add work-related issues to it. All right? I'm trying to walk through this instead of lumping everything where we may have multiple opinions. So we might be able to reach some sort of direction. So from the first part, does the council agree that illnesses, family emergencies, or unanticipated or uncontrollable absences are excused? How many would agree to that? All right. So we have 5 that would agree. How they're the subject of 6, I'm sorry. Please remind me. The next question is Councilmember Parmet mentioned of work emergencies.
Does that fall under unanticipated and uncontrolled?
Well, my question is, would we agree that unanticipated work emergencies should be included in that as well? Just a simple thumbs up or thumbs down. All right, so work emergencies would get added. Is there anything else that should be added to that?
The question is, should that be added, or does it qualify as written? Aaron, would you be more comfortable if it was stated work emergencies? Are you comfortable that it's unanticipated, whatever else the wording is?
I think with here's where we get to that issue of we're making this whole discussion of a bylaw change because we feel the need to be explicit about literally everything of the possibility that someone in the future might do a bad. In that case, I would want it to be explicit. But I feel comfortable with the impression that I have from my colleagues on council right now, completely comfortable, and it doesn't need to be explicit. That's kind of this weird territory right now.
So, again, my question, we did this once, since you raised the question, I'll do it again. Are you satisfied with unanticipated, uncontrollable absences being the belief that work would be included in that, or should we specify it as unique? Councilmember Hagan.
Given the conversation we're having right now, I think we need to call it out specifically.
Thank you. All right, so I can call that specifically. All right, the next question, and just moving down the line, is the third bullet. It talks about all absences cannot exceed 4. That includes 2 excused absences for any reason, as well as 2 additional unexcused absences prior to invoking Article 3 of Section 3.1. And the council member shall inform the council in advance, or basically the presiding officer in advance of all absences. All right, open for discussion. Councilmember Kerr, 2 and 3.
At least that's correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that we need to address 2 unexcused absences. Well, actually, not the second one, the third unexcused absence cause for the council to take action, correct? And that's in the charter, have no desire to change.
Right, that's in the charter, that's section 3.9 of the charter. 3 or more unexcused absences could lead to sanctions, including removal.
So the concern is to get a third absence that would be called unexcused. And there's a lot of baggage to that, like that's an illegitimate excuse, absence. In my work history, if you're do something inappropriate in the workforce, the first bad move gets a warning, the second bad move says, oh, if you do it again, the third time, you're going to be out, or some kind of punitive action. So it feels like unexcused has a punitive connotation to that. And I wonder if we can address that.
That's language directly from the charter. So I don't believe we have the latitude to change unexcused.
No, didn't suggest that we should. That is, I want to be clear that no one here is trying to change the charter. And none of our discussions to date has been. My point is that's included in the absence list of 4 because it is in the charter. I believe we should be looking at the excused absences as a separate entity other than the bulk of 4 before you're out.
Councilmember Parmet?
I completely agree. To respect the charter and the words that the charter committee wrote, those words had meaning, unexcused. Who thinks that's a positive? Literally nobody. And again, the ideas of work, your first unexcused absence is going to get you a warning. Your second is going to get you a write-up saying we'll terminate you the next time. And then the third time you get pink slipped. Okay, so we can't then go and say we're respecting the charter if we say absences not to exceed 4, but we expect you to take 2 unexcused absences as part of the 4. That's the expectation. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. We expect you to go call no show twice a year, but if you do it a third time, we're just fired. That is crazy. And imagine an election day. Aaron's running against Barron, and Barron goes, Aaron, you took 2 unexcused absences. Do you think these people want you to represent them? No, that's nuts. We are intrinsically motivated people by our guiding documents. So, and if you want to, and I would agree that we need at least 4 absences available that could be used with expectation to do so. Yes, if people repeatedly abuse unexcused absences, I think the council is going to take that under consideration, particularly if it comes to that third time. Well, you've taken 2 unexcused absences every year. Now you've got a third one. That's going to be a different conversation than this is the first time. There's perhaps some explanation. But if we're going to have allowed absences, expected absences, excused absences, those are all synonymous, then we're not going to use unexcused absences as part of that number. We're going to have the expectation that you don't have those, and they're not looked upon well because words have meaning. That's what unexcused means.
Then would it solve your problem if we just remove the discussion of unexcused and simply said council members are allowed 2 excused absences for any reason?
No.
Why?
Because I don't believe that 2 is sufficient.
Right. So what number would you propose?
I would propose 5.
Councilmember Hagenow.
I kind of want to break down a little bit with what we're talking about. It seems like that there's a few folks that have spoken about breaking up unexcused versus excused, the 2 separate rules. Is there anyone that has support for keeping them together? Because I'd love to hear that point. I don't see it.
Anyone? I'm happy to pull them apart.
Okay, then going off that, I'd like to also add that I agree with a higher number of excused. And I think that there needs to be an automatic, after 3, it becomes a conversation point. Why is this happening? And if it's, you have a heart attack and you're in the hospital, okay, that's easy. But if it's, I consistently have a work emergency on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Okay, well, let's have a conversation about that. And I think that there needs to be an automatic review at a certain point, and then have a limit on it.
But didn't the prior paragraph handle the work emergency at 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
I think we should stick it.
So your example would.
No, what I'm saying is with excused absences, there needs to be a review of why there's so many excused absences.
But the prior bullet, which we already agreed upon, said that uncontrollable absences in work emergencies are excused.
Yes.
So they wouldn't fall into this third bullet category at all.
No, what I'm saying is if there is a certain threshold of excused absences, we should have a review point on why there's so many excused absences for a person.
But I think there's a question of, no. I think a question to clarify Councilmember Hagenau's point here is requested absences are excused, and this is a separate category from unavoidable, unanticipated, excusable absences, right?
I believe so, but I don't want to give a concrete yes.
Yeah. Work emergencies are unanticipated. They're automatically excused. This paragraph does not discuss applies those, as I understand it, the intent. So what we're really talking about then is the question of how many and what threshold.
Point of information, how can we, I'm trying to understand how this relates back to the charter and what the charter stated for excused and unexcused absences. How are we basing our expansion of excused absences beyond illnesses? And I'm not being inflammatory, I'm honestly curious, like I lost that train of logic.
The charter specifically gave the council the right to define what an unexcused absence was. And that's what we're discussing. What is an unexcused absence? So I haven't heard from everybody, I don't think. If the question is, threshold of I'm not sure how we want to handle this. And I would like Councilmember Davis and Councilmember Sullivan, your thoughts.
Can I make a comment?
Go you first.
Okay. Okay. The question about the negativity of an unexcused absence, I think is a legitimate question. Is that, can this be used in the future against the individual? The way I was trying to address this was twofold. Number one, whether it's excused or unexcused, it doesn't really matter for those two unexcused. There was another embedded question in there is, what is the total quantity? So I was trying, and 4 was not a number given by anybody, by the way. There were those that were far less than 4, those that were far more than 4. So 4 was seen as a compromise. The issue that remained was, will those two unexcused absences be seen as a negative? And will individuals say, well, I'm never going to take an unexcused absence because that's a black mark on my name. So there's two approaches to that. We can make unexcused absences not be seen as a black mark, or make them where they are very negative, and you increase the number to 4 of excused absences for holidays or whatever reasons. But the compromise here was that, yes, it's not elegant by any means, but it gives an individual council member 4 absences beyond illness during the year for only the calendared and scheduled regularly council meetings. But those 2 unexcused absences would not be perceived as a black mark. That is what we need to get over, in my opinion.
Other thoughts? Councilmember Davis.
So I think we've taken care of illness and work and those things. I think the unexcused absences are to prevent people from deciding just not to come, or for planning events on or travel on the night of a town council. And I'm not talking about this year because none of us knew we were going to win. But I think that is one of the reasons that we are talking about unexcused absences. Those are, given the discussion of the excused absences, those may not come. and for whatever reason. And, my other thought, and Dan and I talked about this, I want to limit somewhere. Because 5 is, you've given yourself the opportunity to miss, and I would disagree that saying you have 2 unexcused absences means you're going to use them. But, I do think we need to think about what it looks like. I think it was Steve Martin who said, you know, and Kathy, they like seeing us here. They like seeing our body language. They like seeing. So I think those are things we need to think about.
That's what it was tested.
I support what Gretchen just said. Something else we haven't thrown into this discussion is setting up an official calendar and approving it well in advance. And like reduce the need for additional vacations. We need to consider how far in advance we would set that calendar, consider national holidays. For instance, right now, whenever our town council meetings is scheduled on Christmas Eve, I will be taking an unexcused absence. That doesn't change. And the local public school calendar and the shoulder season. We really need to be more deliberate about how we look forward to setting the calendar, which may alleviate some of this discomfort about taking.
So I'll comment on that. I find it a little bit challenging. But right now we have an official calendar. You may not believe it, we have an official calendar. It's the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday of every month. If we start trying to parse at the beginning of a year that says, the school district now may have a vacation that week, and we should schedule the meeting, then Councilmember Parbeck comes in and says, well, gee, I happen to have, there's a opportunity over here that I should be able to allow to attend. You're now discriminating and saying that it's more important as someone who has a child in school than someone who's trying to balance work requirements as well and may not have children in school. So I have a particular problem with challenging someone who has work that they're trying to schedule vacations around, and also then on the other hand, taking in and considering other scheduled vacations time by the school district into the calendars, because that person who has a child going out of school could simply take an unexcused absence and not be there at that time.
With all due respect, you just beat the horse to death about school absences, but my original comment was about federal holidays. And after talking to Breckenridge and Bristol and Bristol Town Council members, they routinely consider the federal holidays when they set their calendar. So this isn't necessarily about my selfish need for school holidays. I'll be on spring break. I'm not going, I have no qualms about taking an excused absence. I think it implies accountability and fine with taking spring break. But backing us up to the bigger topic that I just pointed out, is being more deliberate about setting our calendar. I realize we have preliminarily set aside the 2nd and the 4th Tuesdays of every month. But when you talk to Breckenridge and you talk to Frisco, they sit down as a group and assess how that actually is applied to the calendar and federal holidays. If we want to take the school out of it, it's just simply another consideration. It's not necessarily about the school calendar, it's about federal holidays. I mean, a town council meeting on Christmas Eve is ridiculous.
Council very easily, and I would expect the council, based on workload and that holiday, to cancel that meeting. Council, town manager.
If I may weigh in, how we've done in the other towns I've worked in is the bylaws specifically state something like the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month shall be the meetings unless such date falls on a federal holiday, in which case the meeting shall be pushed to the next business day. And usually in those cases, the council will just cancel that 2nd meeting anyways. But that way you can always anticipate that if it's Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, 4th of July, the meeting is pushed to the next day.
Did you have something, Jennifer?
Oh, I was just gonna say our bylaws already do say that. They do say that, the town council reserves authority to modify or adjust any previously approved meeting schedule to accommodate holidays, anticipated, lack of quorum and other events or circumstances. So that's always an option.
Other thoughts? Councilmember Hagan.
Thank you. I do think it's important to pull out aspects of what Mayor Riley and Councilmember this just talked about, in the fact that I do agree that we need a published calendar, very specifically calling out our obligation, but I also don't necessarily agree with the aspect of the what was the word, prioritizing certain other commitments, right? I totally get that. It could be seen as unfair. That's why we need to be very tactical with a published calendar. And the bylaws do talk about federal holidays, making sure we appropriately account for that in a January 1st published calendar, for example. And then we are held to that calendar when we talk about this unexcused or excused absences.
And we have an opportunity of normally in January to set the meeting schedule for the following year. Yeah, Johnny, I'm looking around.
I think that's not referring.
The hand wasn't up. Councilmember Cormier?
I just want to circle back to a point that Councilmember now brought up, that actually Councilmember Sullivan originally had proposed in one of these brainstorming sessions, and that I thought was a good idea. And I think Mayor Riley, who also had mentioned this, in the idea of guardrails for approval of excused absences, that there might be X amount that are basically automatically approved by the presiding officer, and after X, there's allowances up to Y with further consideration given as to what is the reason. And one might look at that there is, I'll just point out, if you reach X and you've got 2 unexcused absences, then there's going to be a low, that would probably color any decision about whether to approve towards Y. Which also goes to the whole guardrails of like exactly what is the economy, and helps prevent abuse, because again, if we're going to respect the charter, words that meaning and unexcused, it doesn't have a positive meaning. But having said all that, I liked that idea when it was originally proposed and reproposed and just mentioned now. And I think it's worth the discussion.
Councilmember Hagan.
So if I could throw that out onto the table for discussion, let's just throw 4 as the number for excused absences. What is the negative to having a check at that point, a hearing with the council or executive session? I don't know what like legally we would be able to do. Okay, then what would be the negative to having a check at that point at whatever X is, 3, 4, 5, 100? I'm just making up a number here.
Councilmember Kerr.
I think the underlying concern here is people taking advantage. And we've heard several adjectives along those lines. I think this is a very wise approach to say there should be a threshold, a trigger, a cutoff, after which the council gets to hear the discussion and weigh in and see if it makes sense or not, or if it sounds like someone's just taking advantage of everyone else. There's no question that in person is absolutely the gold standard. To be able to talk with you at the breaks is something that you can't do here. But as Steve so complimented it, I did get that. None of the 2 times that I've had to come in remotely was that something that I planned. And I think we are wise to anticipate that. And then no threshold. So that concept makes sense.
So
So I think that that could be a very good approach and it could be a good compromise. One thing that I do see as a potential downside is that, it can become a personal conversation related to one council member in an open meeting. It can lead to potentially division among council and, become a very uncomfortable conversation if if it's about whether one absence is permitted or not. And is the excuse good enough or is it not? Is that something that you want to be talking about in the open? But again, it might be a really good solution and it might work for all of you.
Other thoughts? Anything, you've listened to all this, Member Sullivan, any thoughts?
I was trying to, one of the things that I think everybody agreed to is how do we make this simple? And, I fear of making it complicated and not understanding to everybody, but, as I am wrestling with the issue as Mr. Barnett said about the unexcused having a black mark. I agree with that. If everybody truly believed that, then I would say, yes, we probably should have the ability to increase the total of the four before the unexcused. But I'm not sure everybody would ever act that way. So I'm wrestling. This is the challenge when we're coming from so many different perspectives. Trying to come up with a compromise. I'm still at a loss.
Councilmember Cormack?
We've spent an hour and 15 minutes on this. I think in total with all of our discussions, we spent about 4 hours talking about this. And I want to talk about bears and dumpsters, and I'm fine with just not making any bylaw changes.
I would like to point out, if we don't come to some agreement on bylaw changes, then we will live under the existing bylaws, which basically don't have any guardrails. So, Councilmember, hey,
Okay, so I'll just try to put out where my mind is there, and I'd like to either talk about this, yay, nay, or excused absences would be limited to 4. At 4 trigger a hearing. Unexcused would be limited to 2. After 2 would be subsequent to the sanctions in Article 3, Section 3.1. So whatever we decide at that point, that's kind of where my mind is. We've already defined an excused absence, illness, family emergency, unanticipated, uncontrollable event, an emergency at work. An unexcused absence in my mind is an avoidable pre-planned issue, so a vacation, something like that. Is there any disagreement, conversation on that? That's kind of where I'm at.
Number 4. Who could agree with the number 4?
Clarifying, I believe he said at 4, there would be hearing if further excuse required.
Yep.
At 4 or
After?
I don't care about split hairs. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be whatever.
Well, what he said was, after 4, any further excusal requests would have a discussion for approval.
In open session with the council.
Yeah.
All right. Who can live with that? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Burr.
I may have misunderstood you, but I thought you said 4 excusals that would be related to this unavoidableness. That's what I heard you say. And then vacations would be considered a county by this.
That is what I mentioned.
What?
So I said 4 excused absences, which would be unavoidable illness, work emergencies.
Thank you for clarifying that, because then Councilmember hanging out. I think that everyone else that said that there's not a limit on true unexcusable unavoidables So if you're in the hospital for cancer, we're not going to say after 4 minute sessions, we're firing.
And that's my intent, right, is that there's a hearing to understand why. And if you do have a heart attack, you do have cancer, then it's, okay, fine, we can continue to excuse these.
But that doesn't address, then there would be no, everything else would be unexcused. What you're proposing.
Vacations or planned absences, yes.
Are unexcused.
Then you would get 2 vacation days and then you're fired.
No, it's not fun. It's 2 vacation days. If you took 2 unexcused absences, you would be subject to sanctions. That, and the definition of what level of sanctions the council chose to take, it could include dismissal, but it also could include other actions.
I'm not being hyperbolic. If that's included, then it's like if you miss 2 sessions, and they're not unavoidable, then the 3rd time you could be fired. I don't.
Could be, yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's what anyone has proposed limits that strict up until this moment of discussion.
I threw it out there and like to hear alternative proposals.
Councilmember Thurston, I'm sure you have a thought on that subject.
I've been
You,
just enjoying that I'm not controversial.
so you actually would not support that?
I mean, I think we need to, I was willing to concede on not limiting illness, family emergency, and define unanticipated and controllable events. But I do think we need to put a limit on how many vacation days, and I thought that's what we were discussing.
Yeah, agree.
So I don't know what that number is. I think accountability is a big deal. We're only required to be here 2 Tuesdays of the month, people.
What, can you give us a number that you think would be good?
I like to.
In other words, basically, everything, anytime you're not here is unexcused.
No.
Oh,
I'm suggesting 2 vacation days, and then anything above and beyond would be unexcused.
all right. How many like 2?
When I asked for clarification point, so you got the 2 vacation days,
Yep.
and then at the 3rd vacation day, it's your first unexcused?
Yep.
Okay.
Wait, no, that's not what I.
No, because you're not supposed to take unexcused.
No,
That's the whole
you can take an excuse.
You can, but you're not supposed to.
Nobody said that.
No one said that.
Unexcused means you're not supposed to do it.
Well, that's it.
That's illegitimate. Words have meaning. If I had an unexcused absence from work, I'm getting warned. If I do it again, I'm getting written up, and the 3rd time, I'm getting fired. And here we're trying to say, well, the charter says unexcused, but what we really meant was, you could do that and there's no prejudice against it. That's wild. But the 3rd time we do it, then we're, taking you up on sanctions, including firing.
Councilmember James.
So we're talking, I'm hearing people say, we're allowing 2, vacation days. Allowing 341 vacations. If you take out the 24, which is probably gonna be 23, meeting. So what I think we're intending is that we each do a little planning, and if you can't plan and you have to miss, then it's unexcused.
With all due respect, it's not a vacation day if there's no expectation of work, you're not getting paid. We're talking, if you want to use technical terms from HR, PTO. You can have PTO that's approved. And I don't get paid for those 340 because, well, I do, because I work at my other job.
Let me, Councilmember first suggested something, I'll throw it out. I'll ask one for clarification. We have 3 vacation in addition to unexcused.
In addition to unexcused.
Or anything else.
Right. I say that because we are stuck.
I know. We,
And 2 is but fly,
Two.
0 is not fly. Actually, 3 is what our bylaws currently say.
So 3 is referring to the MSU. I don't like this. I'd have to ask the attorney, 3 is in the bylaws.
3 or more unexcused.
Excused.
No, no.
Not addressed. Okay.
Would it be helpful? I don't know if this would be helpful. I don't want to add to the discussion, but I was just looking at what removal from office. I mean, it takes a lot to remove somebody from office. You need 2/3 number of town council. For town council to vote to remove somebody from office for good cause. We have good cause defined as all kinds of horrible things. But also then it is an excessive number of unexcused absences. So it's not 3, it's an excessive number of unexcused absences, and then there can be a removal.
Could 3 be included in the definition of excessive, or is there a specific definition that is greater than 3?
Well, if I were providing legal advice to the town council on removing a member from office, the only ground was 3 unexcused absences, I would say that does not.
Could they still vote that way? And would it be legal?
You would need to have it would need to be a hearing before council. You'd have a notice and hearing. It would be quasi judicial. And so town council could decide that that's excessive, and then the council member or the mayor would have an appeal right on that issue. I don't know what a judge would say if that meets the definition of excessive. I don't think it does. 3 does not.
Trying to understand the shift here. So I know it says in the charter, 3 or more may cause the council to take action. Would you, having listened to this discussion, now refer to that as a threshold after which there would be a conversation, but not necessarily a lot about it? I'm trying to figure out what it means.
That after at 3 unexcused, there needs to be a conversation.
A threshold.
Conversation or
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at 3 or more, there is sanctions or removal. Again, sanctions can mean any number of things, which could be conversation, could be maybe conversation in private, could be a conversation in public. It could mean a number of things. I have honestly never seen an elected body take sanction against one of their members.
Councilmember Davis.
Have you seen someone take a whole bunch of instances of town council? Just curious.
It doesn't happen often. I mean, I think people understand what the meeting dates are. But I also work with communities where one community has no electronic hybrid setting, and the only way that somebody can participate when they're absent is by calling in. And I work with another community that they allow their elected officials to participate all of the time remotely.
So you have the full spectrum?
Yes.
Let me, I don't know if this is going to help, and I'm just going to walk through. What we're talking about is, should we allow any life happens? Yes. And that could be.
I think when you're out right there.
I think that she may have that second on.
No, but I think in life happens. I have a sick grandchild or sick parent. I need to go take care of that. That is not or I need to go out and take care of someone in 2 weeks, that certainly isn't unavoidable. From the unexpected, you can plan for that, and that may cause someone to miss a council meeting. And that stuff will happen, folks. Is there any, and that would be separate from the items of illness, family emergencies that are unanticipated, uncontrollable absence?
Is this separate from excuse or?
The question would be, could we allow any of those types of reasons to not be excused? John?
My view on that's it's a family emergency. You have a sick grandchild that you need to take care of. That's a family emergency. I think to be honest, I think we're splitting hairs on defining what we all kind of agree that unanticipated, uncontrollable events, whether it's a family emergency, car breaks down while you're in Denver, can't control that. What I'm more seeing as the contentious point is the vacation. And I'd like to circle back around to the point that Valerie made about the 2 vacations are excused, and then beyond that would be unexcused. I think that's a very reasonable number that meets both the retired aspect of our members that may not have work commitments, and also the working members of our council that may have commitments that are more limited when they can take vacation. I think that's a really nice compromise, and that it doesn't give you the black mark for them unexcused right away. It still allows flexibility in life, i.e. vacations, and it also allows for some restrictions on abuse of that, right? So if you're taking more than 4 days of vacation that happen to be on Tuesdays, that's an issue that needs to be sanctioned, and that with that proposal that was given about 2 excused and then beyond that is unexcused would be the process. So I would like to kind of bring that up and talk about that. I think that's a very reasonable, fair approach.
Councilmember Christie, was that your proposal?
That was the proposal that Councilmember Sullivan had in his absence proposal.
Could you agree to that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to cut to the chase on this one. What Councilmember Hagenow just said, which was basically you're allowed 2 any reason, and anything after that is unexcused. How many can support that?
I don't even think I understand what you said.
What he said is basically, instead of what Dan wrote, you exclude 2 excused absences for any reason is what you're allowed, and then you would have 2 unexcused, then you immediately go into the unexcused category.
With unlimited excused absences for those family emergencies, uncontrollable.
Right.
So didn't we just go around and discuss that unexcused has a negative connotation, and now we're saying the expectation is that people will maybe taking those with no negative implication?
All they're saying you can have 2 absences without any, as you termed it, negative connotation for any reason.
So.
And Claire, Davis.
John, can you read those numbers again? I got lost in the process.
Gladly. So breaking down very specific. Illnesses, family emergencies, unavoidable issues that happen, work emergencies, the things that we've talked about before would be unlimited. You would have 2 excused absences for things that you'd like to do on your own. Vacations, walking your dog, going to see a play. And then beyond those 2, do whatever you want that would be classified as excused. We would have 2 unexcused absences, walking your dog, going to see a play, vacations, that would go towards that unexcused bank. And then at that 3rd unexcused is when you would have sanction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll just comment, that is the proposal.
24, emergency, on Tuesday. I have a little bit, I mean, I think that's,
Councilmember Sullivan.
Yeah, and, well, just a comment. Yeah, I do think that what Councilman Hagenow mentioned is correct. That reflects kind of what the wording says. I'm sensitive to the black mark that someone would read into unexcused, but I think that this is a reasonable compromise. There are those that would like to have a bigger number, even the 2 + 2 is not sufficient. But listening to the folks that spoke earlier, our citizens, I think that this is a reasonable number. And I hate to throw out another issue, but my expectation is that it is a high number. 4 is a high number, and you had maybe someone was ill as well, 5, 6. My hope is that we will allow for virtual participation as well. So that's really the gist of this proposal.
We're talking about virtual participation if you're not present in one of those 4, that you would allow virtual participation.
Correct.
So we haven't gotten virtual participation yet.
I realize that, but obviously they're somewhat related, and that was the only comment. But I do think that the 2, any reason, 2, yes, they're unexcused, but you have 4 vacation days. I mean, that's the compromise.
Or how many can support that proposal? Thumbs up or down?
I could do it with 3 + 2, because I have 2 excused absences this year, and I'll have 1 more, and it's gonna be unexcused.
We have a proposal on the table for 2 + 2. How many can support 2 + 2? And we could work the language so that the word unexcused doesn't appear. So you would basically be saying you have 2 absences you may take for any reason.
then how are we working? So for any reason, and then.
But then you don't have to, that any other absences are automatically excused.
Yeah.
And that's a false under what it is. How many can live with that? 4 can live with that, 5 can live with that. I think we have a majority for council.
And how many would support a proposal for 3 + 2?
3.
Any 2 separate votes.
Well, yeah. How many would support 3 + 2? So it's still 4-3. There's your guidance. The next question is the question, if you are not able to attend in person. So now what we're talking about is for everyone. Potentially you could not be present for 4 meetings, regular meetings a year. Unless you're sick or emergency or something like that, which you could be not present 4 meetings a year. Should you allow, in those cases, someone to participate virtually during those 4 sessions? Councilmember Kerr.
Since the council members are all voted by the electorate, since we are identifying those 4 as legitimate, that would be irresponsible to turn off their participation, discussions and decisions.
Councilmember Hagan.
I completely agree, but I would like to add the asterisk as long as it's an appropriate participation.
Yeah, and it should also include, you could not participate while living here.
I also disagree with attending for executive sessions, given the level of dancing around we have to do to hold an executive session, making sure nobody's in the room. I don't think absent members should be attending executive sessions, we shouldn't put that burden. We're not even allowed to have our computers open during executive session. We've been reprimanded during executive session. Okay, I would like to ask Jennifer what the standards are for an executive session, and I would say that it's too hard to control virtual attendance adhering to those qualifications.
So you remember how I talked about the two communities? They have different rules on executive session. So one rule for one community says you can't participate in executive session virtually or remotely. Another community says you can. So there are no legal issues with that. The legal issues related to executive sessions are confidentiality. They must be confidential. So it's a question of how much you trust other members, how much, what are the guardrails you want to put around it? If you decided that you didn't want to allow people to participate in executive session, one thing that you could do is allow that person to come in and listen to the recording after the fact. That's an option as well, but.
What I'd like to do is address the first question first, which is, and we're not talking about executive sessions, we're talking about regular council meetings. If someone is absent, whether excused or not excused, should they be allowed to attend virtually? And I'll just simply go to how many of you would support them being allowed to attend virtually? All right, you have your guidance. Now the question of executive sessions. Should executive sessions be excluded from virtual attendance? How many would support executive sessions being excluded? Sure.
Good morning. One part of our protocol for executive sessions is that the mayor actually identifies to the tape recorder. Do we say that anymore? To the recording, exactly who's in the room and ask if anybody else is there. We could add something where the person who is participating remotely would be able to clarify that they were the only ones in the room. And of course, with today's headphones, no one else could hear what was going on other than your voice. That is a way to protect the confidence that you're talking, the confidentiality you're talking about. And yet again, ensuring that all voices are heard as intended by the electorate.
Any council member Diston?
I just want to go on the record as saying I am more than willing to accommodate circumstances that necessitate another form of meeting for illness and emergency and unforeseen. I think it's an overly liberal, creative interpretation of the charter, a violation of the charter to allow virtual attendance for vacation and also for executive sessions. I think it needs to be more secure. We need to hold ourselves to a higher level and a higher standard.
Already.
But we have, we're talking about virtual, so I don't. Yeah, and I'm addressing that in other ways on support virtual.
For allowing virtual attendance at executive sessions. Councilmember Hagenow.
Could I ask that we break down the vote based on the different types of excusal or unexcusal practices?
That is, given that the expectation here is that we're not going to count on excused absences as negative, that's what this group just literally voted on. It would be wild to then try and parse that into our verbiage of the bylaws to discriminate on participation based on that.
I'd like to just first start with, do we allow virtual attendance in executive session? Yes or no? Who favors yes? favor is no. All right, again, you have guidance. Would anyone like, and I'll go back to Councilmember Hagenhouse's comment. I'm not sure what Parsley would do in that case, but what you're looking at.
I'm trying to meet compromise. It seems like if you're choosing not to attend the meeting for vacation or dog walking or sitting, whatever, that maybe you would be limited in participation, but if there's truly an unforeseen reason why you cannot attend the meeting, that there would be more of an excused inability to participate. It seems like that might be a notion.
Would anyone else like to address, to go forward along that path, or are we happy with just the allowing virtual attendance? Councilmember Permet?
When Solomon divided the baby, it didn't work out well for the baby. Compromise isn't always good.
All right. And quasi judicial, I think if we have agreement, but quasi judicial cannot be attended virtually.
Yes. For purposes of this meeting, since we're discussing everything, we're trying to remind us that make good rationalization before as to why, but you're not, that's what that is.
I'm sorry, rationalization.
As to why you recommend against.
Because there is often presentation at the microphone for quasi judicial presentations. Some of it relates to physical movements of the speakers, the public who is testifying. It's just potentially subject to challenge because the hearing isn't conducted maybe in the manner that it's always been conducted.
And again,
And that's pretty common with communities, is that's not permitted.
not really in favor of making our decisions based on what everybody else is doing. However, I do appreciate that point. And I think the concern about legalities was one you made before, and I appreciate you mentioning it again. It's really good. But we're not actually.
How many would support?
Oh, after this, I have a question for Trustee Pratt.
All right, how many would support, quasi judicial, not allowing, virtual attendance quasi judicial? All right, I think Councilmember Sullivan, are all the points that you addressed, are they, have we addressed those?
Yeah, there were some shalls in there, but yeah, I think it's all addressed.
I beg your pardon?
There's the issue of we're going to try to limit it to 3 members, no more than 3 being remote, at any one time. I mean, there's the shall things that kind of but the main key issues have been addressed.
What is there? How many would support that the no more than 3?
Here's the reason.
All right, Councilmember Sullivan, why was that proposed?
That's fine. That's correct.
Why was that proposed?
There was a concern about if we had 4 or 5 council members all being remote, that we really are in effect violating, some of the tenets that we had set up and discussed earlier, that we didn't want to have. We wanted to limit the number of people. It doesn't look good for the community. Number of people remote. That was my thinking.
How many would support that? Yes, for Councilmember Hagan.
I just want to say, I think 3 is way too high for a number to be like our number. I think that all of the exceptions we're making about participating remotely need to be the exception, not the norm. And I think that with that being the exception, 3 is way too high. It should be like 1 or 2.
How on earth are you gonna enforce that? And statistically speaking, it's highly unlikely. But how are you gonna enforce that?
I think it's guidance, not enforceable.
Okay.
Could you handle,
And in fact, the wording is, shall work to ensure.
I just think to show our electorate that we mean to be in person, we shouldn't put a higher.
Question for the attorney. Clearly, we can decide to allow remote participation. Does the charter explicitly say that if you participate remotely, you are thus absent?
It's fine. Other things.
Right, as determined by the council. And I think the big concern is always, can we bring our technology up? It's not, sure, absolutely. We can do that. I mean, I just had a meeting the other week with a bunch of, we get 12 leaders from the hospital in a conference room on the conference call with a half dozen surveyors who were people that do audits from the state. And that conversation was two parties on either side went beautifully. So I guess the question is, when we're trying to protect and ensure that most, and our gold standard of participation is person. We're trying to avoid anyone from trying to be able to simply attend remotely all the time because then they wouldn't have to live here. Do we wish to still consider, as a good idea to trial out our system, allowing one per calendar year remote attendance that would not be considered absent? Is there any support for that?
who supports that? Yes or no? You support it? Oh, I'm sorry. I see one person supporting that, so there's your answer.
I didn't understand the context.
Okay, let me try and rephrase that and we could ask the question again. One meeting per year with coordination based on this last thing, we're trying to make sure that no more than 3 people are absent. If that's being honored, then could we allow a council member to attend remotely once per year without it being counted as an absence?
Councilmember Hagan,
On the 16th, like we're trying to add a third absence. And I would not support that.
But we're not, we're saying we're going to attend.
but it make it easy. How many would support Eric's proposal? Raise your thumb. If you didn't, you're not supporting it.
I'm curious. I'm curious what people think.
So I think that's clear. You would not get an excused absence for attending remote.
There wouldn't be an excused absence for that proposal.
I'm not going to parse. Let's move on. Do you have enough guidance to draft a resolution for us?
It doesn't matter. I think I do, so the direction to provide a revised bylaws, and when do you want to see this next? Do you want to see it at a work session or on consent agenda?
No.
Consent.
Certainly not.
Okay.
Would you recommend one session, Mr. Town Manager?
Would it be for the last 2 weeks? But I would recommend it, a work session. I don't think it will be that long because I think we really did hash out the items.
Then, is it unreasonable to ask for that to be at the next work session?
I think that's reasonable, depending on what else is on that work session agenda, but yeah.
I'll ask the town manager, you've seen the agenda, I've seen it, can you fit it in?
Yes, we can, even if we push off our discussion on natural health.
Yeah, finish this. All right, so you have your, is that acceptable to the council? Next work session, a revised bylaws for discussion. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes, all right. The next item is, since we're now running late on purpose, I'd like to defer the remainder of the agenda till the next meeting, if that's acceptable.
Yeah.
In that case, the meeting is adjourned and we'll reconvene in 8 minutes.